It's a nice, wonderful evening out here in this wonderful park. My name is Craig Rutley. I'm president of Land Park Community Association. This is Christine Rogers. She's vice president of the association. We're here tonight to give you some information about public safety. This is only a public safety information. We'll have some questions, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on other things that are going on around the neighborhood. So anyway, Chris, go ahead.
Okay, did you want me to talk to this mic? Okay, great. No. Okay. Yeah. Do we need to turn this up?
Yeah.
Oh, use this mic. Okay, good. We'll just use this mic. We do not want to have what happened last time. So, can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay, great. All right, so I just have an opening speech here. Thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. We realize there are some high emotions right now. People are angry and frustrated and fearful over the recent death of a neighbor, Katie Tibbitts. And like many of you, I was at the vigil, which was focused on celebrating her life. And like many of you, I heard the speaker say this could have happened to any one of us. And they were right. And like many of you, I heard Katie's brothers acknowledge their own concerns, and they said there will be another time to find answers as to why this happened. And tonight is one of those times, and we hope to provide some answers for you. To be clear, this meeting is not focused on the horrible murder, although it is the catalyst for this meeting, but the overall public safety in our community, why it is rising, how we got here, what is being done, and what you can do to protect yourself, your family, and your neighbors. If you find this meeting to be helpful, please consider going to our website and becoming a member, or donating, or joining our board. This is an all-volunteer organization, and our mission statement is our motivation, and it's designed to serve this community and its quality of life. So our website is www.landpark.org. This is our community, and we deserve the right to have these discussions. So tonight we brought law enforcement and district attorneys, boots-on-the-ground experts who fight for our public safety every day. So first, let's review the rules for tonight. The meeting is focused on public safety and crime. It is informational in nature. This is not a debate. It's not a political discussion. It is rooted in finding answers as to why public safety is deteriorating in Land Park and how neighbors can protect themselves. If people want to have other conversations, they are welcome to host their own meetings. Our hope is that you walk away with some new knowledge. We ask that everyone be respectful of the speakers and each other. And like you, they are taking the time away from their families to be here. After each speaker, we'll accept a few questions. Raise your hand and I'll come by with the microphone. We are on a schedule and may not get to everyone's questions. In that case, please see Beverly and fill out a card. We will get back to you and post the answers on our website. So the cards are going to be up at the front at the table at the entryway. So one of our first speakers tonight is Matt Newcomer from the Neighborhood Security Association of Land Park. Why don't you welcome Matt?
Thanks, Christina. Good evening, everybody. Beautiful night, a little warm, so forgive me if I wander just to stay cool a little bit. I'm going to talk from a few notes, so bear with me if I'm adjusting my eyesight here. Christina had reached out to me the other day and asked if I could share a little bit about the story behind the Neighborhood Security Association of Land Park. We also call ourselves the NSALP. It's a very, I think, successful story. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about that and a few other things about some best practices that we've incorporated among our neighborhood specifically. So the NSALP is now in our 6th year as a nonprofit public benefit organization, and we're focused, our charter is basically very narrow and very clear. It's about focusing on enhancing the safety and security of our neighborhood, which we have framed out in our charter between Land Park, Freeport Boulevard, 13th Avenue, which is the street right behind me, and 11th Avenue. We have approximately 163 residences within that block. And the organization was founded really boots on the ground, grassroots, by Emily Hannon back, I think she started the due diligence in 2015, got it chartered in 2016. Emily moved out of state about 2 years later, I believe. And so we started with 72 residences that are contributing to the nonprofit and what we do. Basically, almost every dollar goes towards funding a security patrol that we have within our neighborhood. And I'll tell you a little more about that and some of the wins we have with that arrangement. I think one of the nice stories here is that behind the neighbors, there were several people that back in 2016, there were a couple of changes in the law that were a catalyst for more activity in our neighborhood. We had an abundance of break-ins over about 6 months, and it was rather alarming, the frequency that was occurring, and the drivers behind that had to do with some changes in the law and some changes within the policy. So, and candidly, I think at that time the police department was doing their best and with the resources they had to tackle a bigger problem that was among the entire city. So Emily spearheaded a group of people. They formed a board, got 72 people out of the 162 to contribute and show up, and we started a group of patrols. We're now up to 92, so over 50% of every resident within our framework is contributing to this patrol, and we have 4 patrols a day. So one of the things that I would say is a best practice is around signage, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and also just supplementing the services that we have with the city. In general, we have seen a very, very good, successful lack of criminal activity. We have, your typical person that will come through the neighborhood and maybe is a panhandler or such, but with the services that we have, our patrol, which is Allied Universal, is able to respond to that and leave the police to the really difficult work. And it's been very, very successful. So that's how we got started. A few more facts. I talked about how we're growing. So we started at 72. Last year we were at 83, and we went to 92 residences this year. That's 56%. Another little factoid is that we have, of the people contributing, 50% of that group have signs, yard signs in their front yard, touting that they are part of the Allied Security group. And signage can go a long way, whether you have an alarm or a sign from your alarm provider. Keeping that in front is just one more little thing. There's not one silver bullet, but signage can be a benefit and a deterrent to criminal activity. Some of the benefits of our organization, we do contract with Allied Universal. They acquired First Security Services, which acquired Paladin, so some of you may be familiar with some of those service providers in the area. Allied's been around for about 60 years. They're an international company. They have a local branch here. They have small economical vehicles that drive through with lights on top. They're white vehicles, so that they come through once a day and then 3 times at night. They do provide armed security, so all of their patrol officers carry a firearm. One of the services that they offer is a vacation check, and I'll get personal here about 2 things that my family uses. We do use the vacation check service, so when you're gone, they will come by and look at your house and check it at least 1 time a day and go up and check the gate and make sure they drive by specifically to see that house while you're away. That's been a nice win. I had to use the service one time. This is the differentiator between maybe calling the police and maybe calling the security service. Our alarm went off at like 2 in the morning, motion sensor inside the house. So, our house is locked up, secure, yet I've got my motion sensor going off inside the house down in the kitchen downstairs. So we actually called, security was there within 10 minutes. We waited inside our room until they got there. They walked the house with us. Everything was all clear, and successful outcome, and we didn't have to call the police that night. Had I had, the inkling that I felt I was in more harm, I would have called 911 immediately, but I felt because I had that service, and I wasn't sure if it was just the alarm that something moved outside or something set it off, that was a benefit for us to use the service that night. Another benefit of having Allied there is For those of you that have monitored alarm services, you may have a call list. First call me, then call someone else. We have suggested to people that you can list Allied as a responder if you don't pick up the phone. They can come out and check out your house. The police may also be on that list too, but here this allows you to use Allied versus the police in case you want that service offered. The other thing that they'll do is you can file a notice of trespass with the service provider. So let's say I'm away from my home and there's somebody I see on my Ring camera, there's somebody walking around my house or maybe at my gate, or maybe it's somebody that's panhandling and won't leave my house. I can call the service provider so long as I have this notice of trespass on file, and they can remove that person off your property. So it's one of these services that you hope you never have to use, but it is available. And then I think another thing just about what does our security association, what else do we do? We can be an advocate within the neighborhood. Recently in January, there were some pretty severe storms and it knocked out several banks of our streetlights. So I was able to call the city and said, hey, I'm representing the 162 members. We take security very seriously, and the city was very gracious, and they were out within a week to start the repairs on the lights, and we had them up and running back in 10 days. So considering how critical for lighting can be for safety, we were really happy with that response. And then the other thing we've done is we do hold an annual meeting. This last year we did not hold one for COVID, but we invite the police force out, Sacramento Police Department, as well as our security provider to meet and greet and answer any questions that are going on. So that's a little bit about some of the benefits we've had from our security association. We have a 9-member board. We convene once a year formally, but informally we're always staying abreast of any activity within the neighborhood. One of the things Christina had asked me to do is also talk about some best practices that you might consider, whether you are organized such as us or maybe don't have that benefit. Something to consider are this list of best practices here. First and foremost, I talked about someone being the concern about my alarm being off. If you're ever really feel in need of in danger, don't hesitate to call 911. That's the first thing we tell our members is, if it's a very serious matter and your life is in danger, call the police right away, call 911. But if you feel it's a non-threatening issue, you can call our security provider. So we offer that. But we also make sure that you have that information inside your mobile phone. It's in the frantic moment when there's chaos that you can't find that police number, or everyone hopefully knows 911, but there's also a non-emergency police department line, which is great to have in your phone, and also if you have a security service, save that into your phone as well. I'm really big on this. Partner with your neighbors. You don't have to be best friends with your next door neighbor, but it's really good to know your neighbor, build a relationship with them. I can name the first and last name of all my neighbors around me. We're very good about letting each other know if we're going to be gone or away, or if we're expecting a package delivery. And also around package deliveries, have a strategy around where you're going to have that delivered. Ideally, like Amazon and other services, they have special notes if you have an account with them about where to place that package. Maybe it's out of sight, off to the side, or put a sign that's not viewable from the street, but the driver will see it once they make the delivery. Something to consider. The other thing that we're big about is make a routine each evening about locking up. I can tell you, because of the position I'm in with our security association, I hear a lot of stories about car break-ins, or maybe someone's yard got entered, or someone stepped inside a property or into a garage. I would say 9 out of 10 of those occurrences, in candor, when someone's telling me the stories, they just hadn't locked up their car or hadn't locked their doors, or they left something in plain view in their automobile. So make a routine about checking your cars. I can tell you, before I lock up at night, I always check my car alarm and make sure the car's locked. And then I would say 3 more things here. Keep your home illuminated. If you can, LED lighting is great. It's low cost to operate now. If you can illuminate your house, illuminate your gate, illuminate things from the street so that it's visible, there's no place to hide, that's a very big deterrent as well. And I talked earlier about signage, alarm signage or security signage. Make that prominent so people know. And then something else, I do follow activity on Nextdoor. I don't sign up for all the other things, but I do sign up for security alerts or safety issues. So I don't get a lot of alerts every day from Nextdoor, but I do hear if there's something going on. And then I try to champion that if I feel it's an issue to let our security department know. And then I guess the last thing I would say is don't assume that something is not critical, or if you see something, say something. So that would be the last thing I would tell you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Matt. We're running a little slow here, or fast here, so I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our new captain, who is, Daniel Monk, and Lieutenant Brian McKinney. Kinney, sorry. Come on in. Is he coming up too? Okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Matt. Those are all some great tips, and we look very much forward to working with you and your staff. So anyway, I want to say hi to everybody. My name is Dan Monk. I'm the new captain out here. I was about a week and a half or so. I'm very excited to be back in this area. I started out my career as a brand new baby patrol officer on graveyard, working the graveyard shift out here patrolling for a few years, and then I went to POP, and I was a POP officer out here. And so it's really good to be back. And so, as you all know, I took over the area on Saturday, which was the day after Kate's murder. And like many of you, I had a lot of emotions. I was speechless. I was mad. I was shocked. And I couldn't believe it because, those type of things hardly ever happen, and they even aren't even rare in Land Park. And so being brand new, I called Chris, and I forget what day it was. Now my days are all run together. I think it was Saturday or Sunday morning, and I introduced myself, and I said, how can we help? What can we do? I'm very grateful for our detectives. I know they're not here tonight, but they worked around the clock, like literally around the clock, to identify that individual and get him in custody very, very quickly. So I'm grateful that he's not out running around the community still. But after that conversation with Chris, I started talking to other community members, and I gotta say, I was very impressed, and I'm very honored to be working in this community. I went to the candlelight vigil last night, and I was very impressed to see how quickly people came together, how many people came together, and really what a great community this is, and I am honored to be a part of it. And so, as I look at moving forward, I look at our goals really as sort of twofold. One is, as a police department, how do we help make the community safe? And number two, how do we make the community feel safe? And so statistically, I can look at the numbers and I can say Land Park is a very safe neighborhood. Compared to the rest of the city, it has some of the lowest violent crime numbers around. But I can look around the crowd tonight, and the emails I've seen this week, this community does not feel safe. So one of my top priorities will be to try and fix that. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I can promise you that we will be here right with you in the good times and the bad times, and we will work together to try and make this community safer. And with that, I want to introduce Lieutenant Brian Kinney. Brian is our new executive lieutenant. He has geographical responsibility for this area, so what that means is he's responsible for the crime strategies and the community outreach for this area. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Dan. So, first of all, thank you, and thank you, Christina, for putting the meeting together. Like Dan and I went to the academy together 20 years ago. We've worked together a long time. Kind of some of the history on me, just so you're aware. I was born and raised in Sacramento. I went to elementary school, junior high, high school, and I've lived here almost my entire life. I'm a third-generation officer with our department, and I truly love this department, and I love the communities in which we live in. So like Dan said, we're committed to working with all of you to make sure that not only you feel safe, but you are safe. So having that said, Christina gave me a couple bullet points just to touch on tonight. Clearly, a lot of these topics we could spend a day, 2 days, even a week talking about. But some of the major things she asked us to address were staffing. So just so you're aware, all of your patrol officers for the Land Park, Southland Park, Hollywood Park, Mangan Park, Meadowview, all of your officers are housed out of our South Station over at Fruit Ridge and Freeport. So all of your officers are locally housed and dispatched from. So what does that mean for you? So all of our officers, their patrol is the backbone of our department, I should say. And so what that means is as you call into 911, our number one priority is to answer every single one of those 911 calls as quickly as possible. So our officers are going to be dispatched on a priority basis. So things that require immediate assistance are things such as immediate threat to life and property. And as crimes kind of go down from there, whether it's a noise disturbance, those are going to be at the bottom level of our dispatch priorities. So a lot of the frustration we hear from the community are our long response time, and those typically revolve around the lower priority calls. Now, just because they're lower priorities doesn't mean that we don't want to get officers out there quickly or we don't value you calling law enforcement. Our issue is utilizing our resources to the best of the ability and getting officers where they need to quickly. So my number one advice to you is never feel like you're a bother to law enforcement calling on lower priority things. We encourage you on anything that is important to you to call the police, whether it's your neighbor playing loud music, whether it's a disturbance with a family member, call the police. By us having all of those statistics, it allows us to better serve you as we analyze crime data for specific areas. So again, never feel like you're a bother. One of the questions we often get, should I call 911 or should I call the non-emergency line? My response to that would be, if it's a life or death situation or a crime in progress, a medical emergency, or a vehicle accident where you believe there's injuries or there are injuries, absolutely call 911. If you're in doubt, call 911, and our dispatchers can make the determination whether or not it's an emergency. Our non-emergency number, 808-5471, is for everything else, your missing persons, your disturbances with your neighbors, issues with your family. So again, always please call law enforcement. I know sometimes it's frustrating when you call the police because our dispatchers ask a lot of questions. And they specifically ask a lot of questions because they're trying to get as much information as possible to our officers that are responding to you. So the more information you can provide on the suspect or people involved, the better our officers are to deal with it as they arrive. So things such as description of the person, which would include race, ethnicity, gender, height, weight, clothing description, and they kind of like to go from a top down. So what is their shirt? What are their pants? What are their shoes? Hair color, eye color, all of those things are really important, because just think if we were coming to a park and they said a male subject walking away. Well, there's 50 male subjects in the park, but if you can narrow it down, we're much able to deal with that a lot quicker. Kind of like Matt was talking about, Nextdoor is a wonderful tool, but I am routinely contacted by neighborhood leads saying, were you guys aware of X, Y, and Z at this location? And I'll check our dispatch records, and we were never made aware of that incident. So if you're reporting crime, please do it either via 911 or our non-emergency number. If it's posted to Nextdoor, we don't have access to any of the comments, so we're never going to see that. And so it's because of the great leads you have in your neighborhoods that we're typically made aware of some of these crimes that would go unreported. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with, after calling the police, reaching out to your neighbors and said, hey, did you see this? And generate some additional leads. But again, if we're never made aware, there's not much we can do at the time. Matt did a really good job, and in your retirement, you could lead our neighborhood watch program, because you talked a lot about a lot of the helpful tips that are really helpful. And that was one of the things Christina asked me to talk about was, what will we do as residents to make our houses safer and us to be safer? And you brought up a lot of great tips, and basically the acronym we use for that is SEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. And basically, what can we do with our location to make it safer? And the things you listed are spot on. Lighting at night seems like a no-brainer, but I can't tell you, even my neighbors, when I come home at night, nobody has their porch light on. And things like that are what criminals are looking for, because basically they want to go in and perpetrate their crime and not have anyone see them. So by having your lights on, by having signage saying I have an alarm, or I have a dog, or we have neighborhood watch, are all really great deterrents. Driving around, we have some gorgeous neighborhoods in Sacramento, and when I look at them, some of the things that scream out to me are, that's beautiful, but you have to look at it from a criminal's eyes, and your 6-foot shrubs in front of all your windows are great hiding spots for suspects. So as they see a car driving down at night, they can quickly duck behind those bushes. So keep that in mind. We like to kind of abide by the 2-foot, 6-foot rule. So none of your bushes on the ground should be taller than 2 feet, and all of your trees should be trimmed to be at least 6 feet off the ground. That really gives maximum visibility for your neighbors or law enforcement as they're driving by. Neighborhood watch in general, I don't know if we have any formal neighborhood watch groups in here. That used to be a course that we put on, and it's certainly something we could bring back if there was interest. But neighborhood watch basically was rooted in neighbors looking out for neighbors and really being the eyes and ears for the police department. So if that's something you have interest in, please let Christina know, and that's something we can arrange some training on. Typically it's in smaller neighborhoods where you have several blocks that have a formal agreement, and basically you guys watch out for each other. When you're on vacation, like Matt said, they can look after each other and things like that. One of the really good things about Neighborhood Watch too is if you've driven through some of the neighborhoods, they have the really good signage. So as you're coming in, you realize if you're a criminal that, hey, people are watching because I see the signs saying all my neighbors are looking out for me. I kind of went through that quickly. Was that
That's okay,
all
that's
the bullet
great.
points you had?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving, time's moving quickly here. So the next speaker is Mick Boyd. Mick, can you come up, please? And then we're going to have District Attorney Robinson and District Attorney Thien Ho.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me out here again. My name is Mick Boyd. I'm with the Sacramento Police Officers Association. I'll give you a little bit of info on us, and then I'll go through some of the talking points that I was asked to speak about. So the Sacramento Police Officers Association was formed in 1969, and today serves over 1,000 sworn civilian, reserve, retired, and park rangers in the city of Sacramento. We have 11 board of director members, President Tim Davis, myself, a vice president, Josh Kirtland, a vice president, and I have a civilian vice president, Chessa Mehta, from the Comm Center here also. The mission of the Sacramento Police Officers Association is to aggressively advocate for our members' rights, negotiate a fair and equitable contract, and promote a positive law enforcement image, and provide members and their families with fraternal services and benefits. So basically we are the police union, so we have a little bit different perspective and do things a little bit, we survive through our members, their dues. Thank you very much. All right. So we are active politically. We have a political action committee, so we contribute to politicians, both locally and statewide. We belong to an organization called PORAC, which is the Peace Officers Research Association of California, which represents right now about 75,000 police officers in the state. So they're based here in Sacramento, and they're at the Capitol lobbying all the time. So I know one of the important issues that we're talking about here is legislations that has caused some of these things, and I think Prop 47 is one of the main ones that we've talked about in the past. That was passed about 5 or 6 years ago, and as far as we're concerned, that's kind of led us down the path that we are now. It's decriminalized a lot of things and let a lot of people out on the streets. PORAC was the number one organization that actively opposed that law, but unfortunately it just kind of snuck past, which is something that we need to pay attention to, because it would seem that most people didn't read between the lines, that had there been some more public outreach as to what that was actually going to do, we don't think it would have passed, but it is what it is at this point. So a couple things that she asked that I talk about were defunding. The chief is here. I don't know if he's going to speak, but he's the one that creates the budget for the department and then hands that off to the city manager. The city manager then presents a budget. It's given to council to pass. They make their changes as they see needed, and then the budget is passed that way. We are actively engaged with council on budget, and obviously are always trying to increase the police budget. I know I was here a few months ago and we talked about defunding. There were two items on council regarding the budget. One was a $9 million reduction, and the other one was a $35 million reduction. I think we talked about what kind of cuts that would look like. The $9 million was about 90 officers, and the $35 million was about 250. Currently now we are at about 736 sworn, which is pretty close to our current staffing levels. However, our staffing levels were cut in 2008. In 2008, we had 804 police officers, and we were also about 45,000 people smaller in population. So you can see where not only is it out of whack, was it out of whack then, it's even more out of whack now with the growth in population and the reduction in staff. Kind of the best practice, I think it was USA Today did a study of all the major cities in the country, and generally you have about, the best practice is about 1.5 police officers per 100,000. I'm sorry, 1.5 per 1,000. We in 2008 were 1.3, so I'm not really that good at math, but we've obviously slipped below that 1.3 level due to the reduction in staff and increase in population. Oh, let's see, the value of evening patrols. Again, I think both Lieutenant Kinney and Captain Monk have talked about how we get more patrols. We just got to keep calling. You see something that's not right, you got to call, because that's how it's kind of all driven, based on stats. We deploy based on stats. Again, same thing, reporting. We just got to just keep reporting. Talking to each other, again, we've already discussed that, the importance of neighbors speaking to each other. The more everybody knows each other, the more when you see things that aren't right, you see them. Oh, lastly, who does a police chief take direction from? I could let him answer that, but I'm not going to. The city manager hires the police chief. The city council hires the city manager. We elect city council. So that's kind of how that goes. So I believe that city charter is set up that the police chief takes direction from the city manager. So that's, I think, about all I have. I know I'll probably have some questions later on. Again, we're politically active. We support District Attorney candidate Thien Ho for District Attorney. So I'm sure he'll be coming up next. So I'll be here and I can answer questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mick. Okay, next is District Attorney Monica Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. I introduced myself at the last meeting, but just a quick overview. I'm born and raised in Sacramento. My husband and my kids and I live here in Land Park. We moved from one area to Land Park for safety and for the zoo in Fairy Tale Town. And I can tell you, we've had a lot of conversations about not staying. I don't feel safe in our neighborhood, and I'm a district attorney. I see cases every single day coming from Land Park. I have been one of the 911 callers on many cases when I see something afloat, and just keep calling. If something does not seem right, please do call. Right now, I'm in charge of all the animal abuse cases in Sacramento County, and I'm your high-risk domestic violence prosecutor. My cases range from homicides down to hostage situations and everything in between. So last time we did talk a lot about our homeless issue, and we're not here to talk about that today. This is about public safety. And one thing that we need to focus on is how we got here. We are talking about your violent and serious criminals who are being released into the streets of Sacramento. I was talking to Chris earlier, and she didn't realize this, and I don't think many people do. We have releases from county jail, and we have releases from state prison. Those are two different types of inmates. All can be serious and violent offenders. I'm going to focus on our inmates that are being released from our state prisons, and my colleague, Thien Ho, is going to talk about more this local level. And I think most people know Thien Ho from the Golden State Killer. He was one of our prosecutors that sent that horrendous man away for the rest of his life. So first I'm going to talk about Prop 57. This was overwhelmingly passed by voters in 2016. I don't think anyone had any idea what they were voting for. It was called the let me get this right. Let's see here. Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. It released prisoners who the CDCR decided were not serious and violent. Those are your inmates that committed crimes of rape by intoxication, domestic violence, causing injury, hostage situations, gang offenses, and they even gave homicide defendants better credits, because inmates in state prison get credits. You can get 50%, you can get now upwards of, I think, 80% for homicides, when you used to not be able to get credits at all. That is what this proposition did. One thing I want to talk about is we've tried to reach out to CDCR to see how many inmates were released under Prop 57. They have not responded to our requests, so we don't know. But I can tell you a personal case that I prosecuted back in 2011. It is no longer an active case, that's why I can talk about it. Inmate Jackson, back in 2002, committed multiple home invasion robberies, burglaries, use of a firearm. He went into 2 different elderly persons' homes, put guns to their heads, pinned them down with his arm, robbed them, beat them, stole their car, their jewelry, and their security. He got 8 years in state prison. He was on parole in 2010, so now he is a 2-striker. So he falls under the 3 strikes law. 2010, he was on parole for a whopping 1 year when he committed my crime, the case I prosecuted and went to jury trial on. My victim had his 1-year-old, 7-year-old, and 8-year-old in the car with him, and his girlfriend in the passenger seat. Inmate Jackson pulled his car up in front of the victim's car, boxed him in, pulled his girlfriend out of the passenger seat, beat the victim with a firearm, breaking essentially his entire face. The victim went unconscious, let his foot off off the brake onto the gas pedal, and the car went floored into a fence with the little children in the car. He was sentenced to 35 years to life, meaning he would not be eligible for parole until 2033. Because of Prop 57, I was notified last Thursday, inmate Jackson is going to be released in November, unless the Board of Parole hearings will listen to me and the victim. They have determined that that crime, assault causing serious bodily injury, is not a violent offense in California. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how we got here. Inmate Jackson will be released onto the streets of Sacramento, where he is from, and I am sure we will see him again. I'd like to note that I think we're at 76,000 inmates are scheduled to be released. My district attorney's office, and I believe 36 others, have filed a lawsuit against, I believe, Governor Newsom and the CDCR about this release. These 76,000 inmates, we have no say. The district attorney's office, law enforcement doesn't, and the victims. That is how we got here on the inmates being released from prison. So you need to be careful about what you vote for. And I'd note that the name of that act, the Neighborhood Safety Act, has to be approved by the Attorney General for it to get to your ballot. Our Attorney General in 2016 thought that was an appropriate name, for that proposition that people voted for. So with that, I'm excited to introduce to you my colleague, Thien Ho.
Good evening. My name is Thien Ho. I want to introduce myself for a moment here. I've worked at the Sacramento District Attorney's Office for the last 18 years. I started off handling low-level misdemeanor cases, prosecuted sex cases, gang cases, drive-by shootings, homicide, and as Monica mentioned, the East Area rapist. So in my current position, I am the Assistant Chief over community prosecution, community outreach, our media team, and our post-conviction. And all that's going to have some relevancy in a moment, but what I want to leave you folks with this. I want to leave you 3 words: engaged, informed, and empowered. I want you to be informed, I want you to be engaged, and I want you to be empowered. Now, what does that mean exactly? I want to talk first of all about zero bail and bail, and provide you with a little bit of a legal lesson and a history lesson. So let's talk about bail and what that means. If somebody is taken into custody, now this is all pre-COVID, what would happen is there would be a bail amount set. Our courts, every several years, they would provide and set up a bail schedule. If you were arrested for a DUI, you would have to post a certain amount of bail. It's set for everybody. If you were arrested for a petty theft, a robbery, there would be a certain amount for each of those offenses. If you had a gun and used a gun and fired it, there would be an amount set. This is all pre-COVID. And every county in the state of California, there's 58, had their own bail schedule. Now what happened was, when COVID hit in 2020, the Judicial Council, and they are in charge of all the courts throughout California, they instituted zero bail. And what does zero bail mean? Because you'll hear that, right, in the media. You'll hear it in the newspaper. You'll hear leaders talk about it. Well, zero bail essentially boils down to this. You are released without having to pay any bail. Zero bail. You are released on OR, your own recognizance, or you are released without any supervision or provisions. That is essentially what zero bail is. And the reason why was because we were facing an unprecedented pandemic and we were worried about increased infection rates in the jail. So that was zero bail. That was instituted by the Judicial Council in April of 2020. Then in June of 2020, the Judicial Council said, all right, what we're going to do now is we're going to take away zero bail. You don't have to have zero bail anymore. And left it to each different court in each different county to decide whether they were going to keep zero bail, modify it, or go back to what the bail schedule was previously. Our courts, after evaluating it, decided to keep a modified form of zero bail, which means that for most felony offenses, people were going to get released on zero bail. For nearly all misdemeanors, people were going to get released on zero bail. And as we saw through statistics, in collaboration with the Sacramento Police Department, which they do a fantastic job of protecting the public, with the Sheriff's Department, the statistics began to indicate something very troubling. Out of 5,100 people released on zero bail, out of all of the people released on zero bail, 5,100 people during the pandemic were rearrested. 5,100 people committed an offense and then reoffended again. 5,100 people. Of those 5,100 people, there were several that had multiple rearrests, 10 or more. And so my office approached the court again to modify zero bail for gun violence offenses and for a program that we call the CNO program, the Chronic Nuisance Offender Program. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But when you're talking about here, let's go through some numbers. In the last year, we've seen an increase of drive-by shootings in the county of 233%. We've seen an increase of 44% of shootings in the city jurisdiction. We've seen a 33% increase in homicides. Violent crime has definitely seen an increase in our county. Most definitely. And so when we're talking about bail reform and instituting a form of bail reform, I want to say this. I believe that it's fundamentally unfair for a rich person to get out of custody because they have the money, while somebody who doesn't have the economic means, they have to stay in custody. That's fundamentally unfair, but it's also fundamentally unfair to the victims of crime, to our business owners in our community, when you have individuals that commit crime over and over again and get released. So as we discuss different legislation, all right, that comes through the legislature, as we discuss different procedures, I want you to read them really carefully, because what I think we need to do in collaboration with the courts and our legislators and our political leaders is this. If you are committing crime over and over again, you need to be kept in custody until you see a judge, so that the judge can evaluate your entire criminal history. Do you have a prior violent or serious felony? Do you have a strike? Have you in the past failed to appear in court over and over again? Have you, for example, continued to commit crime while being released? So that the court can evaluate that, and a neutral arbiter, a judge, can make that decision. So those are things that we really should look at. And we are here to inform you in regards to those procedures so that you can become engaged and empowered. And I want to now transition over, and I know that, Monica talked, said, this was really a public safety issue, but I want to address something as well about homelessness, because as I go throughout the county, whether we are in East Sac or South Sac, whether we are in downtown or Old Town, the fact of the matter is homelessness comes up again and again and again. And how do we address it? In a way that is fair, that is equitable, because we don't want to criminalize homelessness. But how do we address this? Because many people feel this, that it's inhumane to let somebody die in the gutter and continue to suffer. The statistics and the studies show again and again that homelessness has a lot to do with mental health and drug addiction. Affordable housing is definitely a part of that equation, but we need to deal with the mental health and drug addiction. And what has the Sacramento District Attorney's Office, in collaboration with our law enforcement, done in regards to that? And I'll tell you about a program that we're trying to expand, because I want to inform you about it so that you know about it and you can advocate for it being expanded. It's called the CNO program. How many of you folks, and raise your hand if you've heard of the chronic nuisance offender or the CNO program? Raise your hand. I see one person. I know our law enforcement officer. I see one person. Two. Anybody else? Three. So as I look out into this audience, I see three people out of all the people that are here. Well, let me explain to you the program. This program was started pre-COVID. And what it entails is this. If you have an individual arrested, cited, or violated on their parole or probation for certain offenses, and they could be vandalism, they could be battery, they could be theft, they could be assault with a deadly weapon, and you have 10 of those offenses within a 12-month period. What happens is that individual, when they get arrested, they will be brought to court. The very first court appearance is called an arraignment. It's where the judge tells the individual what their charges are, appoints them an attorney. And at that arraignment, a community prosecutor will stand up in court and say, Your Honor, this individual is a CNO. They've had 10 or more violations. We are asking that you keep this individual in custody. And the court will then make a determination whether they stay or not stay in custody. And if they stay in custody, this individual will be then offered an opportunity to enter into the CNO program, where they will be evaluated by mental health and drug addiction. And then what will happen is they will be afforded the opportunity to get treatment and placed in a soft, secured location where they get mental health and drug addiction. And if they don't want it, then they stay in custody and they serve the time and are held accountable for that particular crime. But what this does is it allows the individual an opportunity to deal with the mental health and drug addiction. Now, what happened during COVID was, because of zero bail, we could not essentially take anybody into custody for that. So that program was suspended for a period of time. But we have now restarted that program again when zero bail was modified. And what we want to do is expand that further, because we want to create get additional funding, whether it's from the city, the county, the state, to create essentially treatment facilities so that we can address mental health and drug addiction. And that's what we're trying to do and expand on it. But that is a particular program that has been in effect, but as I see here, only 3 people know about it. So we have to get engaged. We have to get engaged and help those that need help, that may not want the help at this particular point in time. So I really strongly advocate that we want to inform you. We want you to become empowered and engaged. Talk to your local leaders. Because one of the things that we have in community prosecution is this. I oversee our community prosecution team. I have a community prosecutor in the South area in the county. I have one in Rancho Cordova. I have one in the downtown partnership. But we need a community prosecutor in the city. And what can a community prosecutor do? I'll give you an example. We have a business that's vacant, and that property owner has that vacant property. They don't clean it up, and maybe we start getting some homeless people coming in or human trafficking occur. So my community prosecutors can contact and engage with that property owner and take criminal action against them unless they clean it up. So we have certain tools in our toolbox when it comes to the penal code section. And so I really want and advocate that we need to expand the community prosecution team. So if anything, talk to your local leaders. Talk to your community, and let's get engaged, let's get empowered so that we can make our community more safe. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Thien? Okay.
Do you want to stand over by the mic there and see if that one works?
Have to be real close to it. Testing. I
Testing.
don't know if it's on. Is the switch on it?
Testing. Testing.
My question was, how many people would be involved in the chronic nuisance offender? When you're talking about 10 offenses in a 12-month period, that sounds like it should be 2 offenses in 12 months, not 10. So how many people would this really impact? And how did you pick that number?
Well,
Thank you.
hello.
Let me just bring the mic
Testing.
back.
I should be close to it.
See, we need another one of these, Craig.
So 10 sounds a lot, right? But I can tell you that, speaking with our law enforcement partners here, the individuals that commit offenses over and over again will accumulate those 10 in a very short period of time. So it's not going to take months or a year to do it. We want to make sure that we treat those that are unhoused and that are homeless in a fair and equitable way, And so that's why we did set a number there, to make sure that it was somebody who was continuing to do these offenses again. And trust me, we're talking about people sometimes with 20, 30, and they rack those numbers up very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. So while it may seem like a significant number, it's really not.
But how many people would that, how many people are you looking at that have that number of offenses?
In terms of looking at, the question is, how many people are you looking at, right? And
How many people would be impacted by that program? 500, 1,000?
In terms of the impact, the numbers, it's not necessarily, in terms of how many in the thousands. It's less than that. But what it does is, those are the individuals that are most at risk. Those are the individuals that are committing the most crimes. And so, while there may not be 1,000 of those individuals, frankly, create the most public safety issues in the community, because you're having those 10. And so that has the most impact, to be honest with you, even though it may not be 1,000 or 500. Those individuals, because of those 10 numbers, they have the most impact, whether it's, on 65th Ave in Stockton, or whether it's in Rancho Cordova, or whether it's, on 10th Street downtown, 10th and K.
anybody else has a question, why don't you just come up here and then that way I'm not running around too much. Poor thing.
Thank you. My question is actually for Captain Monk, if that's okay.
Okay.
So first, I wanted to say thank you for the information you shared and for starting off with the data and pointing out that this is such a safe neighborhood. It's so important to be grounded in data. And the point you made about, the data shows one thing and how we feel is something different. So I just want to say thank you for making me feel safer. This is the safest neighborhood I've ever lived in, but I really appreciate you reinforcing that. So my question is, the issue I have is that I feel like mental illness is so much at the root of a lot of the things that we see. And I feel frustrated that I don't know how to respond to that as a community member. And I wonder, do we have an alternative crisis response, or who can I call when I don't think a person with a gun is the right person to show up and help someone who I see is in need, but I can see that this person's in need. So what do I do as a community member in that situation?
Well, thank you for your question. That is a great question. Should have mentioned it, but so this is my third assignment as a captain. My first assignment was as our support services division captain, where I oversaw our homeless response. And the chief gave me the opportunity to create our first mental health unit that the department's ever had. I think we all see that mental health in our community is a significant issue. And certainly we saw the police department dealing with a lot of that a lot more often than we had in the past. And so we created a team of officers that basically became experts in dealing with mental health issues, in de-escalation, in trying to prevent violent encounters with our department, with the community members who are suffering, and really be a link to services and try to link them with the county. As you all know, the county really oversees the majority of the mental health services in the county, and that's where all the funding comes from. And so, part of that was that we hired Bridget Dean. Bridget Dean is now the director of the Department of Community Response, where she oversees and which, essentially they're going to be the lead agency for mental health and for homelessness in the community. She's a background, and I wish she was here tonight, but maybe she can come talk at a future meeting about her background. She is very passionate about all this stuff, and she really is an expert. She's a mental health clinician. She has a team of folks that will go out there and contact folks. And so DCR absolutely is a resource. They're still in the building process, in the sense that City Council allocated money for them, but they're still building, right? It takes a long time to get infrastructure set up. How are they going to be notified? How are they going to communicate? Who are they going to hire? How many can they take on, right? And that process is not something that can happen overnight. I don't have them here tonight, but I'm happy to send them out to you or next door, or get those to anybody else who's interested.
Thank you very much, Captain Monk. Okay, the last person tonight has requested to speak, and we are very honored to have him here tonight, and that's Katie Tibbitts' brother, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Good evening. Dan Tibbitts. Kate Tibbitts was my sister. Passed away a week and a half. Sorry. Dan Tibbitts. Kate Tibbitts was my sister. Passed away a week and a half ago. We're all here tonight because we are concerned for our safety, outraged that this is happening in our neighborhood. We're wondering what needs to happen. Let me very publicly state my deep respect, admiration, and appreciation for law enforcement, the police department and the district attorney's office. They have been wonderful in very difficult circumstances. There are always, any walk of life, there is always something we can do better. I'm sure the police department would say, yeah, we can do these processes better. I can say that about my own occupation. We can all say that, but that's not where the problem is. First, I'm going to talk about our city council member, Katie Valenzuela. If Ms. Valenzuela truly was working for her constituents in our neighborhood, instead of talking about defunding the police, she should be talking about superfunding the police. But our problems are far deeper than Miss Valenzuela. I truly believe that human nature is good for a vast majority of the population. Maybe that's 98% of the population, maybe it's 99. Irrelevant point, but it's a very large percentage. The problem is the 1 or 2% that's left over. It's a 1 or 2% that is capable of extreme brutality. Over the course of recorded history of our country, acts of violence are carried out. Law enforcement captures suspects. Judicial system prosecutes. Once convicted, these people are incarcerated. Over the course of time, through this painstaking effort of law enforcement, our police and our district attorneys and our sheriffs, a large percentage, a large portion of that 1 or 2% resident evil is incarcerated. And we become safer through the process. But then, on a whim, to appease a political platform of a party that is a platform that is not supported by the vast majority of the population of this state, a politician releases 76,000 inmates, criminals, back into the society. How can we expect law enforcement to protect us when the politicians are just releasing 76,000 people that's capable of extreme brutality back into the society? Our problem is not law enforcement, it is our politicians. Yes, we need to question police about their practices. We need to question district attorneys, prosecution. We need to be outraged at politicians. We need to be outraged at ourselves. How many decades are we going to let politicians make campaign promises that they don't follow up on? How many times are we going to re-elect politicians who routinely go against the will of the population? There have been various elections in recent past where the vast majority of California's population has supported criminal justice. And then on a whim, a politician releases 76,000 criminals. That was not catering to the will of the people. That was catering to the will of a political platform that is out of touch with society.
Okay, well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much. If you have any questions that you'd like to have answered later, we have a table up front, and you can go ahead and write your questions down. You can go look at our website, lionpark.org. We will be posting this on our YouTube channel later in the next week or so. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe.